really good. Bucks County.
Good.
That's all right. So, but when you look at the totals, is we have anywhere from 25 to 30% of the EMS providers are in these 7 county areas, and that is our potential workforce. And that's remarkable when you look at it statewide and where we're at. All these people, all the different certifications, these are where we are statewide. And as you break it down, how it breaks down to each of the counties above. So that's just a brief summary. Does anybody have any questions on the summary of our system? Questions, answers?
Larry, on the workforce data, so we have no idea of that group, how many are actively engaged providing bedside care?
It's challenging to do traditional EMS care because what we don't know is not every EMS agency's applications are up to date. So their rosters are not always up to date. The other challenge is even when they are up to date, we don't know how many of them are actually working clinically. So that you have administrators, you have people that are just life members and just hanging on to that situation. So even within those total numbers, I know Michelle, and I tell this story all the time, there's a guy in Florida that recertifies constantly from Florida and will send 200 hours of Con Ed through Con Ed by endorsement, which is a challenge for the office because it's all extra man hours that we have to work on. Anything else? Does that answer?
Yes.
So, and when I was at NAMSP, they said the same thing is there's EMTs that are working non-traditional, there's EMTs and paramedics working in industry all over the place. So it's really hard, difficult. I know the past administration at BEMS, when they looked at everything, 40% of the providers that were listed showed up on a PCR. And just to go, I want to do some updates from the last meeting. On February 1st, there was a comment part after we did the survey after the last thing. Some of the AEMTs wanted to meet and talk about some of their experiences and stuff. So on February 1st, so prior to that, I looked for the top AEMT providers, and the best way we did it is what AEMTs were doing the most patient care reports. So I picked the top 6, and the reason I picked the top 6, originally it was going to be 5, but one of the AEMTs became a paramedic in the meantime, you know, which is kind of exciting in a roundabout way, because I worried that these AEMTs, we were going to get an abundance of AEMTs and nobody moved forward after that AEMT training. So I met with them, and I think the conversation went really well in expectations and how we're going to move forward in the system. That they're not forgotten, because they frequently feel like they were forgotten and not accounted for. And a lot of it is when we do our QA, a lot of it is to protect them from themselves, because I don't think they've been fully oriented. And the intermediate system in Bucks County is very challenging because it wasn't designed for that suburban area. It was more designed for the urban area where they have truly extended response times. Yeah, rural area where they have extended response times. Not designed for, and the challenges is even in Bucks County, our heaviest penetration of intermediate units is in southern Bucks County, where we have the heaviest penetration of ALS also. So, I mean, Dr. Wider is in the room. Do you want to talk about this process, or you want me to just go through with it? Okay. We still continue to move forward with our pilot, with having intermediate call types. And again, our challenge is making sure that we're not taking away anything from any patients and doing no harm to the current system. So what we do, we identified these call types. And it was a bigger challenge than we ever thought it was going to be in trying to sort that out and making sure we weren't taking too many calls from BLS units and making sure it was safe for these patients to go with the intermediates. So our next steps is we're working on the criteria for the EMD cards. They have to be reviewed and approved by APCO. And then it goes to the communication center training and then provider training also. So even though we've had the intermediate level for quite a few years, it's still a learning process for everyone.
And Larry, to that, I think just one final comment on the call types is, you know, when we looked at all, there's many more dispatch types that likely could have an intermediate category. We identified these within the parameters of the safety guidelines that we came up with around over and under triage of cases. And I remember at our last MAC meeting, one of the conversations was, you know, would this supersede regular boxcar guidance? By that, I mean an intermediate unit being dispatched from another local. And the answer to that was no, we're going to follow whatever your boxcars are. But if the IALS unit is the next up unit, it would be dispatched. Historically, would have gone with a IALS, and an ALS unit would go with the IALS alone, unless there was additional information provided to the dispatcher or to the IALS unit that it needs to be upgraded. And I think we believe that this will allow us to then collect data on over under triage. And I think that's the most important part of this, is we're all learning this process. And we think once we get some cleaner over under triage data, we'll be able to look at, are there other call types that are safe and effective? And what we're trying to reduce is what we see happening regularly, is the regular canceling of an ALS unit on a clear ALS dispatch type. And we have, you know, that's agency level first, but clearly the region has access to that and should through our regional quality assurance process. We regularly identify concern there where a patient is not assessed. Impossibly could be assessed. It's impossible to be assessed because they're unseen for less than a minute. They're recalling and responding ALS unit. Our hope is that by being collaborative and starting this process, we will avoid some of that, and that responding IALS units will not reflexively cancel an incoming ALS unit unless truly they do not need ALS level of care. That's our safety guideposts in my mind. So, and I don't know, I think Barnes, you might be on. I mean, the radio room has been nothing but collaborative in this process to develop.
All of the stakeholders have been great with moving this process. The sad part is the process is slow. Nothing moves super fast.
People wanted this done a year ago, and it takes a lot of time, and we have no way to know how APCO will respond, because ultimately it is their proprietary tool. Although we have confidence that we've created a safe dispatch type, so and dispatch criteria, so we think we'll have good success.
Mm-hmm. The diversion moratorium, we're over a year into the diversion moratorium. And this has been such a hot topic at multiple levels. And again, the hospitals have tried going back, saying that we should go back to diversion. And we did trial runs and looked at the data. You know, the destination amounts did not change from before the moratorium and then after. Hospitals were getting the same. If there was one I think had a 1% change. That was it. 1% less patients, but it wasn't anything remarkable. And I think it would be like 3 months up to 3 months out in looking at that. The interesting part is Pennsylvania ASAP also put a position out on diversion. And again, they actually support EMS. Should be good. Support EMS, that this isn't truly an EMS problem, it's more of a hospital-based problem. And we need more of a broader thing. There are multiple programs currently, and I know just even in this part of the state, with how we're doing diversion. And The one thing we don't want is anything that looks like diversion, because what I think is the impact on diversion is the impact on our providers. Although we say it's a courtesy, but when you're in the hospital, the first thing most of the nurses say, well, we're on divert, why'd you come here? And it has more of an impact on our providers than anybody else. So when you just don't have, when they think they're on divert, they think no ambulances are coming. It doesn't matter about the 35 people sitting in the waiting room, but, it truly impacts our providers. And I think that emotional knowledge of, oh, well, we're on divert, just doesn't work. And I think we got to get away from that terminology and using that word divert, but it's the only thing out there. So that has been the biggest challenge with some of the structures. If they had reporting high volume, fine, but we don't want the hospital to have any ability to say they're on divert unless they have an infrastructure failure.
We've been looking for a situational awareness tool to allow open communication of hospital saturation. The problem is that, to Larry's point, diversion by any other word, its name is still diversion, and our concern is that this situational awareness tools could be used as a de facto diversion tool, which we're not supportive of. And I think, to Larry, what you said previously, the fact that the Pennsylvania American College of Emergency Physicians put out a policy statement on this, and our diversion document was one of the appendices to it, supporting the fact that this is the right approach. And we still occasionally get feedback from hospitals that they feel diversion would be beneficial. What we also have heard tremendous support from the EMS agencies that not having that barrier has been very, very positive to their providers and to their patients. So I think putting the patient at the center, putting patient safety at the center is the right approach.
At the end of the day, I do believe we need a platform to provide that situational awareness to our providers. So when somebody requests to go to a particular facility and we say, listen, they're reporting a high volume, your experience might not be the same that you had previously, and give them the option that, you may wait a little longer based on the acuity of their illness, sickness, or injury. And I think that's the important part. We just got to find an avenue to do that and not create the illusion of diversion.
Larry,
Yeah.
who ultimately approves this? Does that have to be approved?
As far as what?
Like to say, allow this, I guess?
Allow diversion or not allow?
Like to say that we have
There's nobody regulatory that says we can or can't do it. It's pretty much a situational awareness process. That's it. And we endorsed it previously as a courtesy, and it's just gotten completely, and the reality of it is it becomes a game almost sometimes, because the challenge is there's no trigger to promote diversion. So 3 hospitals are on divert, so the 4th hospital is, let's just go on divert, so it opens everybody up, and it's been that way for decades.
So when these hospitals want to try and get rid of this or stop, they go back to the region.
They come to the region, and we make the recommendation. We're not endorsing diversion, and so when they say it's a basic safety, if it's an infrastructure, all right, well then close. But most hospitals don't want to put that close sign up because I think there's mandatory reporting. If they close. So if it's an unsafe environment, then that's the only option.
So we had a comment from a provider that they love the moratorium because it takes away a lot of the confrontation. And then another comment about a website they believe in use in Monco.
Monco has a website, and there's one in the Federation region. My struggle is it just still talks about divert in both of those platforms. And if you have the word, it's kind of like saying bomb on a plane. If you say diversion in a hospital, you know what? It's like, oh, you said consider divert. Did you consider? Yeah, I considered, and I still came. So I think we have to look at it that way.
And we'll talk about mental health, because that's a whole other category and sometimes gets brought into this discussion. This is primarily around emergency department or hospital status, how they tell that status to the Bucks County radio room, and how that 911 center ultimately reflects it to the first responders. And I think to Scott, to your point, when we, the medical advisory committee is where those things bubble up, get discussed and things like that. And hands down every time, when you look at the risk benefit, the risk of diverting a patient or having a patient on prolonged transport has always been, especially if they have a medical emergency, it far outweighs the potential that a less acute patient goes to a hospital and has a longer wait. But I think situation awareness tools are great, and we've looked at the Montgomery County program, which is being used in other places as well. The downside of that is it's from the hospital, and I think until there's a way of having a way of monitoring that data or having an uninvolved third party be the arbiter of that data, you're always going to be left with the fact that, how valid is that data? And then ultimately, if you don't have diversion, or, Larry hit it on the head. You can tell the patient you might have a longer wait, but does it really matter? I mean, most patients want to go where they want to go, and that's probably the way it's always going to be. And I'm not convinced if you say you might wait longer, and if you're having an MI, you're not going to wait longer. If you sprain your ankle, probably shouldn't be going to the emergency room anyway. So, those are much broader topics around the use of EMS and the potential misuse of EMS. But I think what I saw when I saw the Pennsylvania ASAP document was that they clearly identified all of the Pennsylvania area, or many of the Pennsylvania locales that have done this, including Bucks County, which I think demonstrates that this is the wave of the future.
And we transitioned greatly into behavioral health and crisis and 302 warrants. This has been a hot topic because the two hospitals that have, there's 3 hospitals that have crisis support staff have been truly overwhelmed. And for years, we've always just pretty much gone to them for everything. But over the past year, 2 years, truly overwhelmed with the amount of crisis patients. They had a lot of concerns and they wanted to do crisis divert. Well, I'm not sure what the value in crisis divert is. It's okay, we're just going to push patients. And then we had extended transport times. So in the beginning of, I think it was February 1st, the first of the month, they talked to the county behavioral health department, and they come up, and all the warrants now will have a specific destination, and it's tied to the patient's residence. So some of the challenge might be is if that patient is getting picked up not near their residence, then they can be transported to the closest facility. And this has always been because they've always had this illusion that it's a specialty center and the patients had to go there, which is not completely accurate. Do they have the resources better to handle some of these patients? Yes. Do they have staff dedicated for some of these patient population? Yes. But most patients suffering from some sort of emotional distress can be transported to any hospital in the county. They don't have to be isolated to those 3 hospitals. And this has always been a policy. But for some reason, it's not always communicated. And I've looked at all of our mental health transfers in our data collection system, and they're all appropriately being transported. I didn't sell no outliers where people were being bypassing hospitals to extreme. Every hospital has received mental health patients, and there's been no, because when I talk to the hospitals, like, no, we're getting patients from all over. There's isolated incidents, and normally the isolated incidents, a patient transported from Bristol or Bensalem to Doylestown is because it's secondary, because the local hospital is on divert. So their diversion created some of their complaints.
Is it worthwhile? I mean, the biggest education I think we received was, when we think of a crisis center, we think of maybe the Philadelphia model of hospitals that are built specifically to receive psychiatric patients where, what we were educated on is that the crisis center designation was much more around, a requirement of the county to have define locations for people to walk in for mental health resources, but that did not define them as a locked crisis unit, where EMS or police should go. And I think many of us have lived under the false expectation that, use Lower Bucks because it's in the lower end of the county, but all crisis has to go there. That designation is primarily around walk-in patients, not first responders.
Correct. And it's funny because even when you go to the neighboring hospital, you should have gone to Lower Bucks. You know what I mean?
I know.
And it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
It causes huge, there's obviously behavioral health is a huge issue right now. There's huge problems getting patients where they need to go. But I think this one has been, and I think EMS is much less of we have the smaller volume of these, and we typically do go to the closest appropriate facility more times than not. I think police has another learning curve around this because they're used to being directed, and I think that their partnership with the behavioral health office, mental health crisis workers will help to get them to maybe help balance this. And at the end of it, it's all about load balancing. These are incredibly complex patients, very high resource demand. Very limited resources on the back end of where to get them. And they often stay in either emergency departments or inpatient beds for multiple days because they can't be placed. So they're challenging, and we all know that. And I think our working with the mental health office has been, we'll support your recommendations, which at this point is to go to the closest appropriate facility. And I know they're working with the hospitals that don't routinely get them to be more comfortable managing these patients from the paperwork perspective. There's a whole host of paperwork challenges, which is why I think a lot of the facilities would prefer them going to another destination, because all the challenges around the paperwork and the resources to find them an ultimate destination, it's so much more complicated.
And I think even that requirement, that assessment requirement timeline, like when these patients come in with a 302 or potential 302, they have to be evaluated within 2 hours. And if you're a single physician ER, that's a challenge, and especially if you got a waiting room full of people. So I sympathize with our receiving facilities, but at the same note, I understand the EMS point of view, and I understand the hospital. EMS is great, because I remember taking patients into the hospital. I'm like, oh, that's right. This is why I didn't become a nurse, because I'm going to leave, and that's the stuff that that's what we leave with our hospitals, and you got to understand their point of view.
As a police chiefs association been oriented to this?
I think that's coming up, and I know a message was sent out to them. I sent this message out to all VMS and shared it with them, and I know the communication center was sending it to the police chiefs. The challenge is how well does it make it to the street level responder?
I think, so if it's a true 302 that's going through the Office of Mental Health, they will tell them where to go, basically, for lack of a better term. So those, I think, are captive. The officer may think I have to go to Doylestown and they're close to the same areas, but the officer else is going to say you should go to the same areas. The group that's not covered here is the officer has said, you're having a mental health emergency. I don't need a 302. I'm going to transport you. They're going to go where they're going to go. We certainly have no control over that. We can provide education, but we've tried on multiple other fronts with our law enforcement colleagues, and around other opportunities around naloxone and around restraint, with chemical restraint and physical restraint. And at the end of the day, it's a very narrow group that we can get to. So we go to the police chief, but we have no way to say that information gets disseminated down to the grassroots after the rest of the office.
Just a quick update. This has been a project I think I've been working on probably for about 5 years. We finally got a bunch of, we have our physician response team, I think, has been, the concept has been together probably for about 8 years,
maybe 10 at this point.
you know, maybe 10 years, we were able to get $100,000 worth of equipment, but the challenge is always getting the equipment to it, you know, and I was gonna take the soccer mom traverse to get that equipment to our physicians. I mean, we're very fortunate. We have 5 EMS physicians that support the unit. So right now we have a temporary vehicle, which we're still bringing up to date, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have a permanent vehicle. And the value in the permanent vehicle is it's temperature sensitive because we have a lot of electronics. So between multi-patient vital sign system, ultrasound, the cardiac monitor, I think is valuable to have that the climate controlled compartment. It might seem like a little overkill, but when I looked at the grand scheme of things, I think it was what's needed, and I think we only have one shot at it getting this. I think we're very fortunate to have our physician response team, and these are physicians that are truly active in the system. And it's just not that complicated extrication. It's any type of complication that you may have on scene that you can call and get a physician to talk to from the scene. And again, our physicians are extremely active in the system and active in EMS. They understand everything that you go through and have been on an ambulance before. Dr. Wider, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I mean, first off, thanks to the county commissioners, to Audrey, to you for an immense amount of effort to get this forward. As you said, it's been, several years trying to get to this point. But I think, one of the strengths we do have is that several of the missions do have response vehicles already. So that helps a little bit. That's a little bit of a stopgap, but we feel this will provide consistency where, if that the physician can go to the scene and be met by the vehicle, which will have a broader array of equipment and supplies, versus always having that be tied to the physician responder. It will also give a second pair of hands, a regional asset to the physician, which I think is incredibly valuable. So I think this will be a very, very positive thing. And, right now, so Dr. Wong, I think, has gone the last 2 shots, he's always somehow able to do these things. And he, and more times, exactly what you said, it's providing another level of situational awareness and direction. Certainly, we've had some of the more classic, extremity amputation and uncontrolled hemorrhage and MCI requests, but I think often it's really around complex extrication and just another pair of eyes for safety of responders as well as safety for the patients. But I think this will level set that ability to get the asset as well as the physician. Some of our physicians don't have a response vehicle, but they still are part of the program. This will allow them to be more engaged as well because they can go by private vehicle or a other asset. Our air medical services have provided the offer to support this, but the vehicle will still be there. I think it would be great. And I think once it's up and running, will be another great feather in the cap of our regional program that we have.
And the coolest part about this is having Dr. Wong on the team is that interoperability between our county and Montgomery County, and we work very close with them on operation. It's just amazing. And that last physician response team call out had Montgomery County's USAR team come in to help with the extrication. So it's kind of cool that interoperability between the 2 counties. And now we're to your request. So every time we do these town halls, we want to know what people are asking. And so I go through the list and look at everything and try to give everybody kind of, because if you're asking for it, there's probably another 100 people asking for the same thing. And then there's a lot of assumptions on our part that I thought everybody knew this, and it's not always accurate. So I've had two questions about this in the last 6 months where somebody said, when's there going to be legislation that EMS is designated as an essential service in Pennsylvania? And it currently is, and we're one of 15 states or 14 states that have it as designated as an essential service. So we're pretty fortunate. The weakest part of it is the municipal requirements to support EMS is because they pretty much, you need to support it in what you think is right, which is open-ended. So 22% of our municipalities provide no funding to EMS services, you know? And then even the other percentages don't provide enough to EMS. And what we focus on so much is our call volume, and I think we need to change that. The challenge with EMS is paying for that waiting to be engaged time. You know, it's kind of like, you know, Dr. Weiger's like, Larry, I want you to be my driver 24/7 at my beck and call whenever I call you, but I'm only going to pay you when you drive me somewhere. And I think that works for me. I'm sure it does. And I think that's what we really had, and that has been my focus is compensating our agency for that waiting to be engaged time. There was a question about ARPA funds. I'm pretty excited about this. I never thought we were gonna pull this off, but we were able to. The county committed $5.5 million to EMS, you know, and these were the separate contracts for each of the EMS agency, and that's how it was broken down. The EMS Chiefs Association decided on how we were going to divvy up the funds, and there's no easy way in doing it. So they based it on in-service times, and we were primary response vehicle. And that's how they divvied up the percentage of each percentage. So that's how it worked out. This is a Band-Aid. This is on when I say it's a Band-Aid, this is a Band-Aid on a open femoral bleeding wound, you know, and we're hoping for the best. And this is just a bridge to get better funding. And I think we have to really work on this collectively together. I get questions all the time about our EMS leadership. They have a tough task ahead of them. And how do we stay in service? How do we get a workforce? We've never had to recruit. In my 20 years as a provider, we never had to recruit. People just came. And now we're in a situation where we have to put EMS on the map, you know, where there is an opportunity for EMS. And I know the struggles of the labor force of, you know, pay and everything else, but the sad part is pay has come up, but the sad part, the pay has come up only because of supply and demand, not because somebody said, oh yeah, those ambulance drivers are valuable now, you know, and that's where we need to do.
Larry, has the process for reimbursement, how has that been going? Agencies submitting data and then it going to the region and then getting reimbursed?
That process is we worked out. Fortunately, we had some premature entries, and Tim in our office has done a remarkable. She has been the workhorse of the ARPA work and finding the process, because I only wanted to give the process out once. Let's see what they want, what their expectations are. So we used 3 beta tests for the organizations, submitted them. And all 3 have been, those first ones have been paid already for their submissions. So the process is going rather well. It's not fast. You're not getting a check tomorrow. I can tell you the government is not Amazon. You know, not Amazon in the slightest way. So as long as you fulfill that stuff, the process is going pretty well. There was another thing about the complaint process, because for some reason there's a perception that the regional office holds the keys to everybody's certification, which is furthest from the truth. It's not accurate. It's equivalent to, we don't work under a physician's license. We work under their advice, because if we worked under a physician's license, that I would think we would lose physicians, because that's another risk. But what we do is our office works with the Bureau of EMS. We're kind of like their substation and do the groundwork for them, but they make all the decisions. So when a complaint comes in, we get a complaint regardless of what it is. It's the same process. We encourage the person to put in a state complaint form, which I believe they're on our website. And then we forward it to the state. So that there's limited bias, and I've been doing it this way for years. Well, the complaint form's only been out for a few years. So we encourage the state complaint form. If it's a complaint from our office, then it's a direct email to the compliance officer at the state. We collect preliminary information. We do no investigations unless we're approved. So that preliminary information is, was there a call or an incident? Can we prove that there was an incident? Do we have the authority over that incident? Are the provider, who are the providers and who is the agency involved? And that is the preliminary information that we collect to send to the state when we send that complaint form or when they ask. The Bureau either assigns or doesn't assign an investigation. It's truly the ball's in their court. We provide the information, the complaint, and then they approve or not approve the complaint. Once it's assigned to investigation, we start the investigation at that point. So we'll collect PCRs, we'll get medical command tapes, anything that we need, and even the information from the CAT. And then we do the investigation based on who we need to contact. Once the investigation is completed, it's sent back to the Bureau of EMS. And our whole investigation is just fact finding. It's not feelings, it's not what I think, it's truly facts. We only put what in the investigation what we can prove. If we can't prove it, there's no point in doing it. And there's been plenty of investigations where I can't come up with a determination because it comes down to a he said, she said situation. And we come across them on a regular basis that you can't prove it. The Bureau of EMS reviews it and makes the decision. Once it's away from us, it's truly not our investigation. It's assigned to us on behalf of the Bureau of EMS, and we send it back to the Bureau of EMS, and they have the final say on everything, regardless of complaints. Anybody have any questions so far? Anything in the chat? No. There was a question about in-service times. This is the way we've been doing in-service times since the beginning of time. All of our in-service times are listed. Actually, Rick Bossard's in the room, and didn't you do this on Slate at one time?
Yes, no, yeah.
So this is the way, and this is all available on our website. The challenge is we've been trying to do this process, and we're sorting through on how to really manage this. So one of our challenges is here's our ALS in service times. Okay, if they weren't up ALS, were they up BLS? And this has become a very manual process. This is our intermediate. I don't think I have, but I didn't do that. BLS, but all this is on our website and access to everybody. Everybody can have access to this. The challenge is we only monitor at 911 services. So we've even changed our process. So if you have a 911 service that logs off to do an interfacility transport, there's still it still counts as their in service time. That they still are in service. That 24/7 meeting that minimum requirement. I know a lot of the concerns are some of the agencies are struggling with workforce issues and crews and have downgraded their level of service. We've always had a regional plan, but it's never been in writing. So for the past few months, we've been working out our plan and talking about what we do on a regular basis and putting it on paper. And it's been more challenging than I thought. With squads being out of service isn't our biggest risk right now. Our biggest challenge are responder units. Our system's not designed for responder units because when you have a responder unit and you depend on the next medic unit to come in for the transport part, is we don't have a transportation plan. And I think we need a better transportation plan because even if that responder wasn't there, that other medic unit was going to go on that call regardless. So we're struggling with the responder units in some of our areas. So if you have 3 or 4 responder units, logged on, just meeting that regulatory requirement, it becomes challenging if the next transporting unit is 30 minutes away. You know, and they're doing it just to meet that, regulatory requirement and being in service 24/7 with an ALS service. So we're working on that, and I think we're gonna need regionally have some sort of requirement that you have a transportation plan, because you're just shifting the burden to somebody else, even though you're meeting that regulatory requirement. And these are our intermediate services, and it's not remarkable. It's the same services pretty much that provide that, and these are all percentages of time that they're in service for that particular month and agency. So updates with the Bureau of EMS. We're fortunate we have a new state medical director. It's Dr. Daniel Bledsoe, and he was just appointed. What was it, the beginning of the month? 30th. Oh, we're fortunate enough to have Dr. Bledsoe in the audience with us. Yeah, and we're also fortunate to have Director Roan with us today. So I don't know if you guys want to say anything as far as, one of the questions were the protocol updates. I know they're going to be extended a little bit because of the change. Do you have anything?
I don't know. I know that we're simulcasting, so I'm going to talk loud. We're aiming for the end of the summer season. It's very hard to do any work by committee. Wherever the camera is, hi, I'm Dan. So, you know, you're going to try to get them out so that they can be released around Labor Day, and get the education done by the end of the calendar year. I'm actually going to sit down with Butch Potter at EHS tomorrow for a couple of hours and get caught up on the work that's been done before. I do sit on the PHSC MAC as a guest and have done that for many years, so there should be reasonable continuity of that, obviously. I've been networking with a lot of my colleagues and folks that I've known for a number of years in the area, so that's our aim, is to have them out in the late summer, early fall. You know, but that's where we are, getting all that stakeholder input that we've had before and moving forward with it. So.
All right, this is your turn. Is there anything that we missed that you just want to talk about? We can't have crickets.
Hey, Larry,
Yeah.
if no one's going to go, it's Evan from the president of the Chiefs Association. This for those who haven't met me before. I just wanted to make a quick statement. I know I see a lot of comments on social media about pensions and legislation and a lot of things that are going on. And I guess maybe a little over a year ago, I had sent a communication out to attempt to get to as many of the providers as we could as to what the Chiefs Association was doing when it comes to the future plans. So the ARPA money was that big project that was alluded to in that message. And as Larry had mentioned, what that is designed to do is so that your organizations can use that as a bridge while they work on their municipal relationships to educate them and get increased local funding. Getting increased local funding is not easy. It took me 8 years to get Newtown Township to where we are today. And we got the residents to vote yes to double our tax, which started in 2023. And to get anyone to double their taxes is impossible. But that's the hard work that needs to get done. And as Larry had mentioned, it really comes down to, you know, what's the state doing? What's the county doing? And I have to really, on behalf of the Chiefs Association, thank the county, because the commissioners are not obligated to do anything for EMS because it is a local municipal problem. And that's how our laws are written in Pennsylvania, unfortunately. At the state level, can other things be done? There's legislative things that have been tried and failed. There's legislative things that were designed that were going to hurt us EMS wise, including the way insurance reimbursements are done. So while we've been trying to get the legislative arm of the Chiefs Association has been trying to help move some things forward, we've had to step in to stop legislation that was going to hurt us, which included the No Surprises Act, which was going to prevent us to be able to balance bill patients. So not only did we flag this to who was state representative then, Frank Farry, when I got word that it was about to pass out of committee 2 years ago. I forget the name of the organization, but the statewide organization for emergency physicians got involved as well, because it would have hurt the emergency physicians. It would have hurt the hospitals. It would have been a pretty bad situation. So we're trying to put out fires at the same time that we're trying to find ways to improve things, like some sort of statewide pension someday. So some things that could be better benefit all of us to help recruit and retain EMS personnel. So there is a lot going on. And it's always one thing after the other. We start a project, but then we have to put out a fire and stop harmful legislation like the No Surprises Act. So it's not been easy, but I will say this, and the other chiefs can disagree with me and vote me out next year. That's fine. But the leadership of the organizations needs to step up and go at the municipalities. They have to be upfront. They have to show their finances. You have to show your budgets. You have to attend public meetings on a regular basis. And these are the things that we did here to accomplish what we did. The reality is, the paramedic wages are significantly higher than they were years ago. When I first became a paramedic, we made $12 an hour, not 30 to 40 like some providers are making now, which is great. But to be able to sustain that in the future, to sustain those kind of wages, the money's got to come from somewhere, and it's certainly not coming from the insurance companies. So I just wanted to put that out there that the leadership of the organizations who are all active in the Chiefs Association, which are most of them, have been working hard over the last couple of years. And I really hope that the ARPA funding that's coming down and your organizations will use that money in accordance with the grant contracts that came with them, because there are stipulations and requirements tied to the funding that came out. We'll use that as a way to get us through, or get you through, to get to the point where your local officials can do something. There's discussion in the Chiefs Association as to how that message would get out. There's a loosely formed committee that's willing to travel to assist other organizations, to talk to their municipal officials, to give a presentation to them. We've also talked to the Bucks County Association of Township Officials, which is like the EMS Chiefs Association equivalent to your municipal leaders, about the EMS problem. Last year, Larry and I were at one of their, I think it was their annual meeting, which they held online. And the president of the Bucks County Association of Township Officials implored upon their membership about how important it is to fund EMS, to enact an adequate EMS property tax for those that don't have it. So there's a lot that's going on with it. It's very difficult work. And I just wanted to put that out there as to what, we've been doing within our ranks. So that's all, Larry. Thank you.
So Evan, I'm going to kind of dovetail off of what you said there, just because one of the things that we are doing, when you go to the state level, it comes to it's a county issue, it's a municipal issue, it's a state issue. Everyone points the finger. It goes back to the who's on first methodology of solving the problems. And we continue to look at, everyone's looking at just the dollars and cents behind it. And right now we're working through some ideas and talking with our legislative counterparts in the department to start looking at some ways to get money that's sustainable to the system. And looking at alternatives, Colorado, Virginia, they do, Virginia's program is called the 4 for Life program. It's $4 attached to a vehicle registration, so everyone pays a fair share. If we did that in Pennsylvania, it generates $48 million a year for EMS carve outs. If we can get that through in legislative, we've been having talks with policy and discussing that as a potential. Obviously, it's not out there yet. There's no one who's picked up this bill or ready to write the bill, but we're talking about ways to start to look at sustainable funding for the EMS system beyond funding regional council conference, Larry.
No.
But to get more money back down to the boots on the ground providers. The other side to this is, since I've been in this role, one of the things I've been advocating for, and we're committing staff time to, is going out and talking with agencies about how to talk to elected officials. Too often across the Commonwealth, EMS agencies are going to their elected official when they need that $60,000 to keep the doors open and pay payroll, and doing we're going to hold you hostage. That doesn't work, because in budget cycles of government, you have to be at the right point to be considered in your budget. If you come too late, they may have funding available, they may not. So we're trying to find ways to get the leadership educated on how to communicate with elected officials, be early in the game, not late in the game, and try to benefit that communication. Conversely, I'm not just talking to the EMS chiefs, I'm also talking to those township supervisors along the way and trying to get them to understand that when they're there, listen to them. Try to hear what they're saying. And Larry mentioned it earlier, and he references the cost of waiting around. We call it the cost of readiness. So as you're sitting there, you're not making money, not turning wheels. Until we can get that point taken care of, that it's the readiness to serve and serve where we can bill for that service, we have it yet. I was asked the other day to put a funding idea, how much would it cost to fill that cost of readiness? If anyone has that answer, please let me know, but there's no way to justify that based off of looking at something in Bucks County to Allegheny to Tioga to Potter and everywhere in between that really justifies what the cost of EMS readiness is. The best way to do that is still a localized approach. You know your operational cost, but going to your municipalities and explaining to them where this is important. I encourage you as an EMS leader to be at those meetings on a consistent basis. You don't have to go every month, but be there. And if you have a township board member or borough council member who gets appointed a new elected official, learn about them, learn something about them, have conversations with them, and become their friend. Because that way they know you when you come there. You're not just coming with your hand out. You're not holding them hostage. You have connections. The more information and sharing that you have with them, and Evan, you mentioned it, open your books, talk to them and explain where your costs are. Don't be secret squirrel about it and say, we need $60,000 to stay open. We had one municipality be approached by an EMS agency saying, I need $120,000 to sustain my service to your community. The township was willing to write them a check, but they wanted to see the books and they wanted to know where their money's going because they have a responsibility to the taxpayers. And the EMS chief looked at them in the meeting and said, I'm not showing you my books. I don't have to. I'm not going to. I need this or else. And the township, the chair of that committee had some very choice words in the meeting and said, well, if that's the case, we don't owe you insert a bunch of expletives of money. We fund it as we need fit, which is the way the township and borough code is written. So be engaged with your local officials, go to their meetings, be part of that, talk to them about your cost of readiness and the ability there. If you need our support, we'll gladly work with Larry and the regional council to come out and help you through those conversations. On a converse note, we have 3 new positions joining the Bureau of EMS outside of our normal complement. They're funded under a CDC workforce development grant program. One of them will be a leadership development position, which is going to be focused on creating training and education to take that awesome clinician and help them understand the business model and talking to elected officials and moving them into the idea of being the next chief. So the chiefs in the room, I'm not trying to replace you, but I'm helping those people better prepared and create a career ladder to move forward there. The other positions are rural education position. They're going to be the ones that are starting to look through getting tools together to find the unmet needs of the rural population. How do we take those BLS clinicians who back in the day used to be very strong clinicians and only needed a medic when they needed a medic versus now they want a medic on everything that may or may not need a medic, and get them back up to a competent, well-structured system. And our third position is going to focus on rural education. recruitment and retention. Sorry, I had to run through which one. So the recruitment and retention position, the Office of State Fire Commissioner has 3 recruitment and retention folks. I was lucky enough to get one. And I am going to be working with that person to find ways to address some of the recruitment issues. Obviously, everything that we talk about when it comes to municipal pensions for volunteers, that all takes legislative change. But really trying to break down the culture of, for you to come work at my EMS agency, you have to have 2 years of experience prior to being hired. There's a lot of EMS agencies in this world that are doing 911 service today. They won't hire someone fresh out of class. Why? We need to get to the root cause of that, but also change the culture of, this is someone who's eager and wants to get into our system. Open the door to them, train them to your culture, help them understand that. That way you're not beating the bad behaviors that they learned at an interfacility transport company or another agency that is there, and you're trying to get them into your culture, and they then see you as the, I'll never meet your standard. Train them to your standard to start with, open those doors up. And I will tell you, in meeting with the secretary yesterday, one of her concerns is her daughter completed an EMT program and said, I couldn't find a job. It took me by surprise because everyone has the help wanted sign out. But then looking at some of the help wanted signs is, we want experience. So we're trying to look through the process of, when we recruit people, can we create more of a career academy, earn while you learn, and go through those processes. We're looking at different things at the state level to try to benefit the system. And I will tell you, it's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable when we're making changes. But we have to make those changes to create a sustainable system, or we are going to continue to go on a downward spiral of not having enough people and looking at things. I will tell you, a county in the northwestern part of the state, in their county-wide or broader response plan, they have EMS chiefs looking to lead the county-wide or broader response plan because the fire chief doesn't like the fact that they are sending the closest appropriate unit, not the closest available unit. So the ALS unit might be 5 miles away for the stub tow. The closest BLS unit is 15, and they're sending the 15-mile away BLS unit for the stub tow and keeping the ALS unit available. The fire chiefs don't like that because it's now taking someone from a different area in a different kingdom and a different colored ambulance into their kingdom. We need to start looking and changing the culture of closest appropriate versus closest available, and looking at how those are, and that really makes our system uncomfortable. So we are doing things, we're working behind the scenes in a lot of cases, but I will tell you that we are engaged and we will do everything humanly possible to make progressive change to help Pennsylvania maintain a #1 EMS system.
Aaron, I have a question for you. Larry talked about 22% of municipalities in Bucks County don't contribute anything for EMS. Clearly, there's a grassroots engagement necessary between that EMS agency and that municipality. But on the flip side, where is the pressure at the Commonwealth level? I'm not saying Department of Health or Bureau of EMS per se, but at the Commonwealth level to say, where are you living that you think that this commodity is free? I mean, I'm aware of municipalities in this region that pay for a police officer to work, 8 hours a day, although they could use the state police, have $2 million in fire apparatus for a 1 square mile municipality, but will not pay for EMS. Where does that, because it works best, in my opinion, if it comes from both sides. Clearly, the local EMS agency advocating, but also there needs to be top-down pressure to say, what rock do you live on as you think this is free service?
So I will tell you, in the last year, that has been my standing point. So unfortunately, when you talk to the legislative folks and things like that, the way Commonwealth structure is, the lowest form of government has its ultimate say. And the township and borough codes very clearly say it is your responsibility to elect and designate emergency services and fund it as you deem fit. And when you look at the finger pointing from the state down, up, down, everywhere in between, state goes, we've given them the authority to do so. So the messaging comes from us. And we're really going out and having those conversations with those folks. And the analogy that I use, and obviously I'm a very tall individual. My first car was a 1987 Yugo. I'm an EMT, so I'm not discouraging or degrading our BLS providers, but you were the Yugo. gets the job done, gets you from point A to point B, no fancy bells and whistles, does it, the job. Cadillac, top of the line, all the bells and whistles, your new physician response view. Looks pretty awesome, by the way. I think I may have to buy one for the state director. But if I come to your municipality and say, I'm gonna give you this for free, which do you want? Do you want the Yugo or do you want the Cadillac? Every municipality I've ever talked to wants that Cadillac. And then when I go, okay, first year, I'll give you the Cadillac free of charge. Gas, maintenance, driver, all the stuff that goes in it, free of charge. Kind of like your deal with Larry. But at the end of the year, you're going to be responsible for that Cadillac at $750,000 a year base. Anything above that, that's your responsibility. And they go, oh, well, how much is the Yugo going to cost me? $250,000. Still going to get the stuff done, but you have the ability to support it. Regardless of which one you want, you need to have the ability to support it. It may not be 100% paid, but if you're supporting it and giving money, and if any of the EMS chiefs in the room on Zoom have a different opinion of this, that if someone's giving you some money, even if it doesn't cover your entire cost, it's better than nothing. And you're going to turn someone away that gives you a $5,000 stipend out of their municipal tax money, because that's all they can afford. If you're going to turn that down, let me know, because I will find an EMS agency that will take it. But we need to have that communication that you as the elected official need to understand that they're providing you an essential service. And I'm using that term more because while it is in the law, we don't define what essential is, other than it's the municipal's responsibility to fund it. So you are responsible to ensure that you have the service and you're funding it as you deem fit. Then we go into the conversation of stop thinking that EMS lives on the fact that we can bill for service. We can, but traditionally when we bill for service, we're getting 30 to 35% of what we bill for. And the great thing about a lot of elected officials is they have real jobs outside of being an elected official at the municipal level. How many of you are in HVAC, plumbing, heating, attorneys? All those. If you do work for me, and I tell you I'm only going to pay you 35% of what you billed me, what are you going to do? Refuse me service in the future? Put a lien on my house if you're a construction trade? Or come and take all that stuff that you just did to my house away? You know what EMS can't do? We can't stop service when someone calls because they're not paying their bill. So that goes into the cost of readiness is now offset because we now have bigger costs because we're not recouping for the service when we provide it. So we're trying to get them to understand that you have to do more. And obviously we're not asking them to write the $1 million check. We know that that's not going to happen. We're not advocating for them to raise taxes, but the $500,000 that they have now, if they give that to EMS straight off the bat, that's better than the zero that they're giving now. So those are things that we're pushing from the state level, and we're going to continue to push that message. But our state push is the elected officials need the education. And to do that, we have to have a collaborative from the grassroots up from the agency and us supporting it from the top down.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And some of the challenges is with that 22%, the majority of that are hospital-based units. So they've never taken anything. And and don't get me wrong, a small part of that pocket is local municipalities that are covered by our third-party service. But a majority of them are ones covered by hospital-based service, you know, and which we have to realize. And I think reality set in when St. Mary's discontinued their operations, you know, that a multi-million-dollar healthcare network couldn't afford to do it. And we're, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you, when you look at, maybe Evan's done it, when you look at across the county, how much municipalities give, do you look at it at either a per resident or per capita? Because I think that, you know, you can't compare Ben Salem Township to Ivy Land Borough in terms of, well, Ben Salem gives X, but you could look at a per capita or a per resident.
I think that's even a challenge because that kind of even disservices our rural areas Because our most rural EMS agency, if they did it based on per capita, they would still be operating in a bigger deficit because there's not as many people. You know, so when I look at it, I've been looking at it as the number of ambulances should be, the reimbursement should be based from the municipal, should be based on the coverage area. So an area that has 5 municipalities, what percent, one ambulance is covering 5 municipalities, and it should be based on landmass that way initially. Because regardless whether you have people living there or not, the EMS agency is responsible for going in there. So if you look at Northern Bucks County, there's no houses in Nockamixon in the park, you know, but our EMS service has to service that area, you know, for the rock climbers and stuff like that. So as far as the per capita, I think that's a challenge. But and that's why I've been focused on the land mass, because the land mass doesn't change. We don't have to worry about more people coming in or not, because there is a higher cost of readiness in our more rural areas because they don't have a volume to support it. They have to be there for the resource.
Larry,
Yeah.
on that, so, I mean, the property tax millage and the way they do things now might be the only current fair way to do it based on the laws that are in place. But it really should be like a police department. I mean, whether we cover, you know, a 14 square mile area with 1,000 residents, or a 4 square mile area with 50,000 residents, the hourly cost to staff the ambulance doesn't change. And I know you did a number. It's probably a little bit higher now. It's somewhere between $700,000 and $750,000 a year per ambulance, if you load it with like a paramedic or a paramedic and a half. You know, police departments get paid based on what their budget calls for, whether they run, you know, 2 police calls a shift or 50 police calls a shift. And someday, somehow, EMS has to be looked at as another public safety agency that has to get funded. And we have to rely less and less on the insurance reimbursements. And it's not just us feeling the squeeze now. I read Becker's hospital reviews, and now the hospitals are starting to complain that the insurance companies are making big profits and they're getting reimbursed less. So we're not the only ones feeling it now, finally. But, you know, that's kind of where I see what the whole funding is we have what we have. It's not great. It's not a great method for funding even what is out there. We're grateful to have what we have, but it really should be funded, and EMS needs to be looked at more as a public safety agency like its fire and law enforcement counterparts.
I hear what you're saying, and I think we really got to focus on our insurance reimbursement should be based on the care we provide, not so much on that waiting to be engaged time. We're trying to fund the care bill for the waiting to be engaged time, and I think we got to change that mindset, because everybody says, well, you get the bill, but when a municipality hires a trash company, they don't check and see what their revenues are first and then decide. You know, this is what it costs to provide the service. And I think we really have to focus on that. Listen, we've been very fortunate for the last 50 years in the EMS. And the sad part is, and even the fire service for that matter also, is we've gotten those 2 services for a bargain price, you know, over the years. And now the economy is different. Definition of work is different, and it's become more challenging, and things are different. And we have to adapt to these differences. And I think that's the biggest challenge. That being said, is EMS in itself has to take some sort of personal accountability. We can talk about our staffing issues and complain about, you know, our staffing issues and working overtime and mandates and stuff like that. But we do have to also take some personal accountability that we have an individual that's interested in EMS to tell them, don't go into this, get out, you know, and most of us haven't done the same. And it's such a challenge. We can't work in that mindset. This is a person that has an opportunity that might be able to cover a shift for you someday, and tell them to leave, this system sucks, is horrible. It's so challenging. We're kind of defeating ourselves.
Joe, you had your hand up a while back. Do you still have anything? Okay. Well, this was posted in the chat. Not quite sure how to answer that one, to be honest, but.
What's that? The private transfer? I'm not sure how you want to pull them to a higher accountability. I don't understand that question for them. They have the same accountability as EMS. It's just a different EMS business model. So a private transport company is fortunate is they have a decision tree on whether to take a call or not take a call, where we have a duty to act. So I'm not sure what the increased accountability is. And EMT should have a choice on where they want to work. Or pre-hospital providers should have a choice whether they want to do pre-hospital private transport. I think we sell our private transport companies short in most cases because it's a needed asset. This is who our hospitals depend on, these companies to take the sickest patients to the next level of care, regardless whether that's a discharge, rehab, or higher acute, tertiary care. And I think we have to keep that in mind because some of these patients are the sickest of the sick. You know, it doesn't seem glamorous or anything, but when you get in truly critical care transport, it's a whole different game. Well, they're not a feeder for 911 recruits, and this is where we have to change that mindset because we kind of defeat our purpose by just saying that the private transports are feeding the 911. 911 has to accommodate those individuals that want to come in. If we're neglecting them, then that's a problem, you know, and send them. And then we tell them when they come back, we have no 911 experience, you know, and I think that's kind of unfair. There we go, eating our young again, and we shouldn't be. There's so many missed opportunities, and I thought I had a slide, I must have missed it, but we have 2 EMT classes in our tech schools, and for the first time in my career, our Lower Bucks Tech School, a majority of the students in that class have an interest in EMS, as opposed to law enforcement and fire. There's a dominant impression. And if we don't do something and mentor those people for the next 3 years and find a place for them, we are going to lose them. And when we lose them, we'll lose them forever. And we got to find a way in doing it. And we have to be creative. It may cost us a little money in the front end, but in the back end, it may save us some money. And I think these are great opportunities. Paying for people to go to class, again, opportunities. I know it sounds difficult, but I think we have to try everything. Doing nothing is not the solution and hoping it fixes itself. We are finally in a situation where we're not going to buy ourselves out of this situation. You know, we're not going to buy ourselves out because we've proven it time and time again that, okay, here's $4 million. Okay, I still have no people to do it, you know, and talking to different EMS agencies that, you know, municipalities approach them like, what should I ask for? You know, and I'm like, well, what's it going to cost you? And we're the first ones to go into it. We're a business that will go in and start a business in a deficit. You know, okay, I know this is going to be a losing proposition, and we got to stop doing that for ourselves.
I mean, Larry, as an agency member of a 400 facility company, a lot of those, and I'll often ask them when I'm doing their credentialing, like this, and many of them either have done 911, and this is a less lifting and moving, less direct carrying of patients. You know, they like the schedule better of inter-facility work versus the abrupt, you know, klaxon at 4 a.m, waking you up, you know, you know, their ability to have better life work balance. So I think, and now that salaries of inter-facility companies are similar or exceeding 911, which historically, you know, wasn't always necessarily paid, you know, a lot of them doing it, and we should hit it on the head. We don't have inter-facility companies. You think our weights are bad now at hospitals, and offload times are long. Don't double or triple. I mean, we desperately need more inter-facility investment, more companies willing to do inter-facility work, because, you know, the wait times now to get an ambulance for a discharge, a BLS discharge, could be 8-12 hours. You know, to get the ability to move somebody who requires advanced life support or critical care. Very few assets, and the wait times are outrageous, not against the companies, it's not enough assets. We should be embracing our infertility colleagues, not shutting them away.
The funny part about it is right back to what I said, is we want somebody to do a business, but we only pay you when you're actually working, not to be ready. You know, so the non-emergency transport, and I hate calling them non-emergency, but that tertiary care transport, wherever that may be, whether it's rehab, nursing home, discharges, is hospitals want them to be on the ready, but we're only gonna pay you when you transport somebody. If you want somebody to be on the ready, you gotta pay them. Why don't we only let the ER docs stay at home, and when we need them, we'll call them in, you know?
Why need a driver?
Exactly. The business model, and as we've grown through the years, that's where we're at, and we gotta have realistic expectations, so, you know, well, we can't get anybody, you know, and you're never gonna get that 24-hour service.
Even for the retention, when you were talking about the EMT class in the tech school, some agencies have, we talked about before, lowered their driving age because you get these young people in, but you can't use them for 2 years, you're gonna lose those people.
There's an opportunity where they can get them in, and even if it's a third on a truck, that's somebody you can train for 2 years, and they're gonna get great clinical experience, because a majority of us, that's how we became clinical providers. It's almost equivalent to that, our volunteer time, except they're getting paid. Real quick, Dr. Bledsoe had something to say.
I mean, one point in that, you know, the emergency, non-emergency, and the earlier topic of diversion.
Yeah.
Hospitals on diversion because they have no beds upstairs, so they have overflow in the ER. And nobody's getting out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as a system, we are part of the outflow solution. We have to embrace that issue.
We can't hear the doc.
Said something.
And they couldn't hear you. They couldn't hear you.
Is somebody on the outside talking?
Yeah, we lost audio there for a minute.
Sorry, all I said was that, I mean, all the way back to circling on the topic of diversion, you know, remember that, you know, a lot of the discharges from the hospitals are via EMS of some sort. And if we don't get the patients out, they don't get the beds. And if there's no beds in the ER goes on divert because they're taking care of people who need to go upstairs and there's nobody to transport the patient home. And so, you know, as we look at our mission, you know, sometimes getting some of those people out is a help and is a good for the next emergent patient that's sitting in that waiting room or you on the wall. Thank God, you know, I mean, the wall times are flaring up again.
So I want to touch on 2 points here for the standard and kind of going back to that recruitment side of things too. In our world, based off the EMS Act, an agency is an agency regardless if they are what our colleagues in Philadelphia used to refer to as the non-municipals, the inter-facilities, or any of those other services in EMS. My goal, and Dr. Bledsoe in his role as the advisor too, is we are raising the bar for everyone. Because I will tell you that there's EMS agencies out there, there are 911 agencies that can't meet the bar now anyway. And it's not just on staffing, it's on their equipment. They're trying to get by with what they can. So the system as a whole, regardless if it's QRS to aircraft, we need to raise that bar for standard and hold accountability and help those systems to grow. It's not to be punitive. It's not to come out and take your license away. It's not out to shut someone down or force mergers and consolidations. But the public has an expectation of, and when the medic arrives, regardless if it's EMT or not, everyone's a medic or everyone's an ambulance driver. When they show up, they have an expectation of care. The problem of it is across the Commonwealth, we have quite a few areas that the ambulance sits there and will never turn a wheel because they can't staff or they don't have equipment today or they're not communicating with the neighbor. Their inefficiency in the system then draws down somebody else who's efficient and creates burdens elsewhere. And it's that stone going into the pond and that ripple effect. And that's what we're trying to stop, is that ripple and bring everybody back to a nice, smooth sail. It's a difficult challenge. circling back to the recruitment side, I met with the EMS chief the other day who has a college in their town. And I said, one of the things that you really want to consider is reaching out to those college folks. There are some that are coming here because they're going to go on to nursing school or they're here for their nursing degree and they have an EMS background. Invite them to come work for you. Work around their class schedule. Because you know what's going to happen is word of mouth is going to spread. You worked with me. They were willing to work around my schedule. They helped me do this. They gave me the shifts that I needed. And when they go off and graduate, they're going to have told somebody else in the organization that this agency will work with you. Go check them out. But it goes back to the give them experience in your agency, mold them into your cultural environment, help them understand that your billboard, your ambulance, your company, your name is important in that community, and they'll continue to help that. Their response initially was, well, that's only 2 or 3 years of their time that I have. I want someone who's going to be here for 15 years. Kind of going back to that free check from the municipality. If they're going to give you $5,000 today or nothing today, which would you rather have? If you want someone who's going to give you 3 years of their time or 2 years of their time, is it better than nothing? Yes, it's a revolving door. Yes, you got to train somebody new all the time, and you know that's a burden to us. But if you have a revolving door of people who are coming in to fill that person's spot when they leave, you've met some of your staffing issues. We need to look at things from a bigger picture other than what we've done for years past. The status quo has to change, or else our status quo will be, we don't have enough funding, we don't have enough people, we don't have this, we don't have this, we don't have this. And agencies are going to shut down, and we are going to create health deserts where we have no EMS to go take care of somebody who needs it to get them to the hospital. I missed talking about this earlier, but one of the things I'm advocating for and talking with our policy folks, again, requires legislative change. And if you've ever realized what it takes to get legislative change to happen anywhere, I may be dead or retired before this gets anywhere further than where it is, but having people have open discussion about it is opening up the idea of the community paramedicine mobile integrated health, that it has legislation behind it. Looking at ways to fund that. Obviously, when you talk about funding mobile integrated health, the insurers automatically are going to go, we're not paying for that. Even though several large insurers already run those programs through their hospital systems as well. What it does on the flip side for the providers doing it is it provides protection. Right now, everything's being done under delegated practice authority of the physician, and that opens up the physician if something goes wrong, or it's an extension of hospital services. We think if we are able to produce a community paramedicine legislation that moves it forward and gets it recognized, and we can get some financial stability behind it, that we will see a reduction in the calls for the stub toe toothache, the non-medication compliant people, because we're going out and being better stewards to public health and explaining to those folks why it's important to do this. The other aspect is also having providers be able to understand what resources are available to help Mrs. Smith determine whether or not she pays for her heat or her medication, and work to help her be able to survive, because everyone knows now that the older people are staying home longer, not going to sniffs along the way. So our goal should be to create resources and availability beyond just the lights and sirens, which goes back to the idea of when we are talking about recruitment and retention. The media, mainstream media, screws us over daily. Everything that we see on Chicago Fire, 911, and all those other shows makes this look like blood, guts, and gore. Everyone's a life-threatening emergency. We're doing great things all the time. They don't tell you that 2 o'clock in the morning you're going to walk into a nursing home for a GI bleed and smell halfway down the hallway. They don't tell you that you're going to deal with people on a regular basis who have substance abuse disorders. They don't cover all these things that we deal with that create the mental health issues. That in itself is another priority area of the department, is discussing mental health and first responders. We're continuing to push forward with ways to help that. But we need to make sure that people coming into our industry understand that we aren't just lights and sirens, glory hounds that are going to be on TV. There's other parts to our business, including that public health model, that we have to address.
I'm open for any comments, concerns. This is all about you guys, everybody in the room and out in the field. This is your opportunity, and I want to encourage it. And don't be afraid to say anything, because there's a lot of people. Like I said, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know how to relay that information to you. But we continue to work on the system. We're doing the best that we can. But it's really going to take all of us, inclusive, even the regular providers, if we want to move this system.
Feel free to direct message and text. I'll keep you anonymous.
Larry, the last meeting, there was a thread of conversation around regionalizing EMS in Bucks County. We talked about it briefly about, obviously it's a municipal responsibility, not a county responsibility. And then I know there was a thread that came from that around, well, maybe, we can use the county pension system, which I do know you can live. But I guess more broadly, it seems that always comes up as the solution versus municipal engagement. I'm just curious what your thoughts are, and then Director Roan's thought as he has multiple counties versus multiple small municipalities.
The bottom line, as far as regionalization, we don't know what regionalization looks like, because we kind of quasi our region. We have 50 communities that are served by 17 EMS. So we cross municipal borders. We also cross county borders going to county comes in.
We're losing our,
I'm sorry, what's that?
you went distorted there for a while. We didn't hear the last couple sentences.
Oh, we kind of quasi are regionalized based on our municipalities. We cross boundaries all the time, whether it be municipal or county boundaries on a regular basis. As far as regionalization, I'm not sure. I don't know what it looks like. Is it 3 different EMS agencies covering the whole county? Is it 5 agencies? Or is it a county government-based model? But the government-based model, it always comes back to, no matter what you call it, is who's going to pay for it. Because I've talked to several municipalities, and several municipalities say, why doesn't the county just take this over? And it's just transfer of taxation. So they can say, well, we didn't raise your taxes. It's that county that did it. If the state comes up with a state EMS force, similar to the state police, that'll just cover whatever you want it, it'll be like, who's going to pay for it? Again, I'm not sure. And we have a different workforce today that I always struggle with. I get the comments all the time. Well, I can make more money at Walmart. I can make more money at Home Depot. The problem is we don't have anybody leaving to go to Home Depot or Walmart. There's very few people, and everybody says it's the retirement and pension. And I agree that helps, but in the grand scheme of things, the most of the people that want that that's going to keep people that are in the system. Because I can tell you right now, our communication center has been hiring for the last 5 years. They are 25 people short. They pay people to do the training to go through. And once you're done, you get almost like an $11 increase, county benefits, county pension. And guess what? They still have a shortage today. So I'm not sure it's 100% the solution. And we have a workforce that things have changed, our priorities changed. So our workforce is not so much, we're going to go and we're going to work 14 jobs and to the end. A lot of people, the younger generation, and this is not a criticism, sometimes I think they got it right, because my generation, we work for stuff. Okay, you know what, I want to go on a cruise, I'm going to pick up 2 extra shifts, and before you know it, becomes a domino effect. There's 2 extra shifts become for, oh, now I need a Harley, so now I'm going to pick 2 more. So the newer generation is, I want to fit work in around my life, not put life around work. And I think they have a point of it, you know, life's too short, and we realized that going through the pandemic. You know, that some of us missed out on a lot of stuff that they didn't even realize they were missing out on. And so this isn't just a general EMS. It's fascinating when I look at nationwide of the EMS prices. So this isn't a Pennsylvania or Bucks County issue. This is a nationwide. And if you're not convinced, go look for articles on EMS in San Diego. Look for EMS articles in Santa Clara County, you know, complain because the fire service kind of has an EMS system, but not 100%. They kind of can pick and choose what EMS calls, and a third-party service comes in. And when you look at the benefits between the two, they're remarkably different. You know, and they're being held to the carpet with some of these contracts. And I think we really have to look. This isn't just a local issue. This is a nationwide issue.
So since you asked for my thoughts, I'll chime in here as well too.
So one of the things that,
While it's a nationwide issue, it is a local issue. And today I just got a news article that 8 municipalities in Lancaster County created a regional EMS system. So while we are supportive of legislative change to create a municipal authority model that allows it, there are municipal authorities that exist currently in the EMS system in Pennsylvania. There's in Blair County, AMED is a group of municipalities that went together to fund their EMS agency. The problem of it is where it becomes a local issue. And it's not local in the fact that it's just here. It's local in the fact that it has to be addressed at the municipal level. Is going back to that conversation of Yugo versus Cadillac. What do you want? What are you willing to accept? And what are you willing to support? Because while we all want the high end, do we have the tax base to support it? Do we have the capability to support it? If you look back to the original white paper of 1966, there's discussion in there that tax base across the country is not strong enough on its own to support EMS. So what are we looking at today? Tax base that is still the exact same thing. We need to look at other funding alternatives. And we have to look at it from a perspective of what can we do? Because I will tell you, if I walked in any municipal leader today, county official, township, whatever, and said, I want you to raise the tax, or I want you to create a tax on this, I might as well go outside, stand there with the bell and say, I'm an idiot. Because no one wants to increase the tax. I'm going to get told that in the rural counties, you're lucky you have rural parts of your county.
Rural-ish.
Rural-ish. You go to the Tiogas, the Potters, the Huntingtons, where it's rural. They don't have the tax base to support this kind of care, but everyone thinks they need an ambulance in their backyard. Everyone wants a hospital in their backyard. Everyone wants, we're a want society. I can go to Walmart and get everything I want. I can get it on Amazon. It'll be here in 2 days. I want it quicker. But when we look at what we're willing to pay for, you know, and Larry, you hit your head when you said there's going to be a statewide state police version of EMS. I appreciate that. You get Ben Salem's mobile. I think there's a problem. The concept comes back to we need to have those local officials truly understanding what the needs are of the community. When I first started, well, before I took this position, we met with an EMS agency who had 500 calls a year and wanted to maintain ALS service 24/7, 365. And when I asked them, what is your billable rate? What of those calls that you have, what are you getting out of this? You don't know. Why is every call going out ALS? Because we have a Medicare and they need to. It's showing what it is. And then when we talk to the community and say, listen, right now, financially, at 500 calls a year for running this service, you may not last another 3 months based off of what we can see and what you've shared with us. But we're vital to the community. of the 500 calls they got a year, they responded 28% of the time to those calls. So when I asked them, what do you do in a time frame when you're not responding to those calls? What do your citizens expect of you? Well, we're trying. But the time that my father had a heart attack, this came from their board member, we were there. Well, that's great. You were there one time out of the 28%, you were there for someone who really needed your service. The rest of the time, another agency had to come cover you, which then impacted their constituents. How do we address this today to work together? You're 10 miles away from this other agency. Why not become a QRS? Provide the level of care that is appropriate. If not, downgrade to BLS. Could you staff a BLS ambulance 24/7? Well, no, because then we wouldn't have two people, because we'd get rid of our medic and we wouldn't have somebody else that would. In the back of my mind, the hamster's going 17 different ways going, are you hearing yourself of why you can't do this and why you want to stay where you are? Well, what have you talked to the municipal leaders about? Well, the one guy goes, well, I am one of the township supervisors for this community. It's the school district's problem because they get to tax and they get to do all this stuff. Why doesn't the school district, who brings kids that don't even live in this township here, pay for our ambulance? Wow. So you're unhappy that you have a school in your backyard that creates revenue because you have local taxes being collected out of that. But because kids that don't live here, you don't care about them. Those are the issues we face every day in this Commonwealth of trying to get the EMS system to drive forward. Looking at regionalization has to be a discussion of those folks who see a change in what they need at their level and what they're willing to support. And that includes informed discussion from the EMS chiefs. If you want to regionalize, support it. If not, explain why you can support your system the way you are and what you need to maintain that. It all has to come back to what the needs of are the local jurisdiction and what they're willing to do. And I will tell you, there's been a couple of counties that said, well, why don't we just create a county system? And it goes back to the transition of taxation. No longer a municipal issue, it's the county issue. And then you can be upset at the county. Well, if something goes wrong, now you have county employees and all this other stuff, and it's just changing the cost metrics to where it comes from. We can make the system work, but there's no one size fits all system. We have to be open to ideas.
And to your point about the regional system, the regional system doesn't mean extra pay, you know, because one comment was if we had a regional system, everybody would be making six-figure salary. I don't make a six-figure salary, you know, so I think some of our expectations have to be realistic, you know. Anything from the people in virtual? Do you want to follow up the medical program at all? Program that we're still working through. I believe we're still on the same target as before fall of 2023. The challenges is making sure that anybody interested, and Michelle's been keeping a list to help those people that are interested in a fall program moving forward. You know, making sure that they get that pre-admission test on so they know, so they can work on those required courses. So hopefully after you have your meeting, you know, and to the paramedic program is moving forward, but again, it's going to be a hurdle because what we have to realize is all these classes like the attrition rate in paramedic programs throughout the Commonwealth is about 30%. You know, so we have to have a program that's going to have a decent amount of people with the expectation we may lose 30% of those people in the program during the course. And it's not just academic stuff. Life gets in the way. It's a big commitment. And I think we have to realize that. And again, if we don't get enough people, this is something that we said, we told our legislators and our county commissioners, that we need this, and if we build it, they'll come. You know, I think, Michelle, is the list like 28 people?
Yes.
In that ballpark, you know, and the challenge is we have to keep them moving so they can be ready I would imagine would have to be August. So my bigger concern is making sure that the college gets done all the other requirements. And that's my concern. I have no control over it, but it's my concern. So. Jay?
Well, a quick one from the EMSE program, EMS for Children. There's a current survey out there right now. We're requesting all our EMS agencies please respond to that. Bucks County has been leading the charge across the Commonwealth at a 45% response rate on that. Thank you so much for all those who have done that survey. And please, if you haven't had an opportunity, please do that survey for us. It helps greatly. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I didn't even know that. Anything else? Jason, anything else in chat? I'm working. Okay. I do that for years about sleep deprivation, and my concerns with it and the people jumping from shift to shift. We have very little. What I can tell you, when I did some preliminary data look, you know, at our login, probably about 10% of our providers work more than 300 hours a month. You know, and there's only 700 and some odd hours in every month. So they're spending 50% of their time on an ambulance. And I think it's unsafe. The bigger concern is everybody thought it was medics, but we have EMTs, and that's even a bigger concern, because the problem with sleep deprivation is you don't even realize you're tired half of the time. It's kind of like CPR. We told everybody, you know, when you do compressions, after about 2 minutes, you get tired. And they're like, no, I don't. No, I don't. And they're confident. You know, sleep deprivation is not much different. I can do this, you know, and it is a concern. And I don't even know how to correct that, because we can't mandate people not to, is you have to take your own well-being. What I can say, and I use this analogy 1,000 times, if you're a duck boat operator and you run into a barge, they're going to want to know what you did for the last 3 days, you know, and then they're going to question it. So what is our liability and what is our risk? You know, it's concerning that I know it's a big risk. And because you're tired, I'll just drive this fall is not the answer. And I don't know which is more detrimental, you caring for patients or not, because I know, and listen, I tell people all the time, I've done a lot of this stuff. I've worked 36 consecutive hours, and that last 12 hours is painful, you know, and I'm not the same person. I got naps and everything, but just being engaged, waiting for a call. So.
But ultimately, it's not a CAD issue, because you can bypass the system. It's ultimately agency level, whether we like it or not. And most agencies, I don't think this is a really difficult thing to look at, because, you know, if you hold that provider accountable, they'll go to agency wide, who may not. You know, accountability is one of the most important things that we overlook. And, you know, in this day and age where there's I hate to call it shortage, but a potential lack of providers for all the jobs available, accountability is something the agencies are afraid of, because if you say no to provider A, they may say, I'll go to agency B that doesn't care if I work 3 days straight.
I agree, and that was a policy years ago that Joe Schmieder had, would send out reports about people working consecutive hours, but there's no way we can mandate that.
Got nothing else going on in the
Nothing.
chat here.
I don't have anything else. We're gonna send out a survey again.
Yep, I already sent the link out. I'll post that again in the chat.
I can't emphasize everybody putting their name, email address and certification number in the chat so we can work on that Con Ed quiz. I'm hoping to do these on a regular basis. I think they're valuable to get rid of some. And if you have any questions, we can put it on the agenda for the next town hall. I think these are great conversations. Like I would have never thought about talking about EMS as an essential service, you know, and it's the second time it's come up in the last probably 3 or 4 months. So I think a lot of stuff is good to talk about. All right, I have nothing else. We can close it.
Thank you, Director Lutz. Thank you, Peter.
I'd like to thank Dr. Bledsoe and Director Roan for stopping in Bucks County. They just happened to be passing through.
Yeah. I saw this great Facebook message and Instagram about town halls, so I figured I'd stop by.
All right,
Good job. Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
You all.